I still think that men are still more oppressed, and the reasons why is that I think that men have a lot less social freedom. Oh yes, yes.
Yeah, so I would say generally it's not super sensible to say men are more advantaged than women. Overall, both sexes and both genders are they are oppressed in different ways that aren't really directly comparable. Would you say that makes sense?
I mean, yes, I guess. Uh, yes, I did. Yes, I do think that makes sense.
Hello?
Hello?
Hey, you there?
What do you want to discuss, really?
I think we were going to discuss your opinion about are men more oppressed than women? That was your take, right?
Well, yes. And uh, I heard like many arguments against this case recently. I did been in another debate with someone else about it, and well, I still think that men are still more oppressed, and the reasons why is that I think that men have a lot less social freedom. If you know what I mean. Like,
I get what you mean by that, but could you list some examples?
I can. So, one would be is that men will not be accepted if they would present themselves femininely, unlike a woman that presents herself masculinely. And I do think that men also are much easier to get cut off from basic needs like love and attention due to the social or maybe even biological factors that are happening right now. And I'll explain why there's so many men in incels that are men and not women that are incels.
So that makes a lot of sense, but when you say accepted, can you go into more detail on what you mean?
Or like not being like ostracized by the majority of the people here, like in the world. Well, more specifically this country.
Yeah, so I think this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because if you think about it, a lot of women who like present masculinely as opposed to like the inverse of a man who presents femininely, you'll notice a lot of these women do in fact get ostracized. Like if a woman is ugly, she'll be ostracized not to the same extent a man will, but in different ways. They're not really directly comparable things.
Yes, they will get ostracized, but like it's a huge gap between how much ostracization happens. It's like it, like you, I wouldn't feel safe if I went and presented femininely. That's how big of a gap it is.
So do you think there might be any reason socially why people are more aggressive towards people who present femininely than people who present masculinely? Do you think that might be a case in defense of the idea that women are more oppressed even?
No, well, actually, I think it's more of how men are viewed. Like, I think socially, men are expected to have more like restrictions to how they act than women. I think that's why uh, they're more ostracized, in my opinion.
For almost every restriction, I'm thinking that you'll probably be able to name. I'm guessing there are inverse restrictions for women. Like there are restrictions about women being too masculine, and especially in more conservative households, the idea of like a woman wearing pants would be something they'd probably react worse to. So can you go into more detail on what you mean by like more restrictions?
Well, like, even by some progressives, I think, they still expect men to be in this way to act, and I know this because I've seen many progressives online, like, this, I think, like, discourage men from, going outside these boundaries, and many people outside, like, people, like, more progressive people, like, being against men from moving outside those boundaries, if I'm saying makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about here. I would say that despite the fact that there are a lot of progressive people who have like this strange kind of anti-male sentiment, there are a lot of conservative people who have anti-female sentiments. But I get a general idea of what you're saying now, and I'm going to give you my opinion here, just to balance things out, so you know where I'm coming from. I do disagree with your statement that men have it worse than women. I don't think that's true. But I don't think that necessarily women have it worse than men. I think that these aren't really sensibly comparable things. I think if you compare things like historically, the position of men and women in society is miserably bad for both sides. But I don't really think you could substantiate the idea that one group has it worse than the other. The ways in which men and women are oppressed by gender roles in society isn't really comparable. And I would say that women exist kind of historically as a middle class throughout society. They don't have the ability to exist at the top rung of society like men do, but men at the bottom rung of society don't have the ability to like opt out of working, for example. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
Well, yes, I do. Basically saying that both are oppressed, and yes, I do agree that both are oppressed at the moment. I do think men that have a more disposable type role, I think.
Well, I would say that's true for some men, but not all. Wouldn't you agree? Wouldn't you agree? There are some men in society who aren't considered disposable, like the rich and CEOs and such, which are disproportionately going to be males.
Yes, I agree that there will be males that aren't disposable. In fact, the ones that aren't disposable are usually at the top of society, but the vast majority of men will be seen as.
Wouldn't you also agree then that proletariat women are also kind of considered in society to be semi-disposable at least?
Yes, semi-disposable, but nowhere near as disposable as men. From what?
Well, nowhere near as disposable as lower class men, but definitely nowhere near as indisposable as upper class men.
Yes, that's true.
So overall, wouldn't you say it's probably more accurate to say not that men have it worse than women, but that women and men have it very bad in different ways, and they aren't really directly comparable like that?
Well, yes, there's many different ways that they have it bad, that both have it bad. But I do think that comparisons should be made, because there wouldn't be such like a huge number of dissatisfied men specifically if things weren't going worse for them. So, don't you think?
Well, I think there are a lot of dissatisfied men and women, and I think from your perspective in particular, you're only able to see one side of that because, of course, you are a dissatisfied man. but I think that there are people of all genders and of all walks of life who are dissatisfied with their current lot in life. I think people feel alienated from their labor. Have you ever heard that phrase before? I know you're a leftist, but I'm not sure how into theory you are.
Yeah, no, I never heard that phrase.
All right, so I could go into detail on like what alienation from labor is, but effectively everyone in society doesn't feel like they're. I'm sure anyone you talk to would probably agree. They don't feel like their work is really important to society or to themselves in general. It always feels like you're just working for the sake of your boss, right?
Yes.
So in general, this is something that both men and women can feel. This isn't like specific to men. It's just something that you're only able to see it from the perspective of a man because you're a man. So overall, I would say the idea that like men have it worse than women is just the only reason you're of the opinion that this is true is probably just because of the fact that like you're only able to experience the oppression that a man would deal with firsthand. You're not able to experience like female oppression because you aren't female.
Ooh, should I talk about the dude experiencing female oppression?
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Yes. Like I heard like many people say this already. So like I don't really. I'm gonna be honest. I don't really have the best argument like against that right now. Like because like I heard many people say it already, and so and I didn't do too much research on my end. So I apologize for that.
Oh, that's no problem. But are there any things that come to mind that you might want to discuss in regards to this?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that sounds terrific.
Yes, most definitely. I think one of the biggest problems is it's power that women have over relationships. I think.
Okay, could you go into more detail on what you mean by that? Terrific. Yeah, go ahead.
So, women seem to be sort of like the gatekeepers of relationships in general. They're the ones that get asked out, and most women are pretty much guaranteed to have a relationship, which is needed for most humans. And men don't really get that, and that's including like friends. It's not just like a romantic relationship either. It's like all of them, and I think that's one of the biggest gaps between the two, and having like a social like structure within your life is very important. Like some would you'd say it's one of the basic needs. Human and men are very easily cut off from this, unlike women are.
Yeah, I agree that social structure is very important, and I do agree that like humans need relationships. I think you mentioned it being one of the most fundamental needs. I think in like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think is one of the ones that's listed there, if I remember correctly. But I don't necessarily think that all human relationships are romantic relationships, and that seems to be what you're getting at here.
No. It wasn't like I did say like all relationships earlier as well. Like women are much more likely to gain friends.
Okay.
Than men, because I see a lot of men that don't have friends at all, and that plays in part of the gap.
Would you say that you think a lot of women have healthy friendships?
Like, I mean, I don't know for sure, but like, I think that most of them do, at least.
Okay. You mentioned the idea of women being gatekeepers of relationships, and that the
When I meant that, I meant romantic relationships, gatekeeper of romantic
yeah. I
relationships.
don't want to equivocate here or be dishonest. You meant gatekeepers of romantic relationships. They're the ones who get asked out, and most women are guaranteed to have relationships. You said. In
Yes.
in regards to them being the ones that get asked out, obviously this isn't always what happens, but this is the majority of cases. It's the woman who gets asked out. Don't you think because of things like Tinder and dating apps, now there isn't really that need to have like one person be the approacher and one person be the approachee? Don't you think that's sort of getting eroded away?
No, I do not. Like, there's a similar structure with, I think, Tinder as well, is that the man has to be the more assertive one, I think.
Well, I'm not sure about more assertive one. I know I use Tinder to meet my boyfriend. I'm effectively exclusively gay. But the way in which you do that, you swipe right when you see somebody who you find attractive, and you both have to together have swiped right on each other to match. So there's nobody who is like the first person to approach the other person. Obviously, there are
It's
lots of
very
issues. Oh, go ahead.
Please, I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's no problem. Yeah, obviously there are some issues with Tinder as a dating app in general. It's not the most healthy environment, but in general, it's like that gatekeeper of relationships being the women is kind of being eroded, and even that historically only exists because of the fact that there's been past oppression towards women, and they had to effectively be the gatekeepers of relationships. And before that, if there weren't gatekeepers of relationships, there were arranged marriages, and effectively the parents were the gatekeepers of relationships. So this more seems like a burden on women, and also some factor of oppression towards men, and not like exclusively men being harmed by this.
Okay, so, like for Tinder, for like men and women are very different. Like how they would interact. It's like on like dating apps especially, this is where like the 80-20 rule would come in which like women would go for like the top 20% of men in attractiveness. And they do generally need to be assertive unless they're like really attractive, and that's like very unlikely. And you said that women also see being a gatekeeper as a burden.
I didn't say women see it that way, but I do think that would be an accurate way to describe it. So yeah, just go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I just have to disagree. Like, sure, there may be like some detractors from that role, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as the role men have of being like, they could be like have ruined mental health depending on a woman, really.
Did you say? What? Could you repeat that last part? I didn't understand you.
But I think that the men's role is worse because one's mental health could really depend on a woman, I think, due to her role.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. You said that men's mental health depends on the woman.
Well, yes, if you're on like the lower end of attractiveness, like, and social skills, I think, which is like 30%.
So, do you think that that people who aren't able to secure a romantic relationship aren't able to still be mentally healthy and secure relationships in other areas that might still fulfill that like basic human need?
Like maybe for a few people, but most people will need both friendships and a romantic sexual relationship because sex is also like the human needs, Marco's human needs. If yeah, I think that most people will need both. Is what I'm saying.
So you think that most people would need like a romantic relationship to be mentally healthy? You think that's not something that that somebody could abstain from? For example, there are plenty of people who are. Oh, go ahead.
You could abstain from, but that really depends on like the type of person you would be. Like an asexual doesn't need that.
So, do you think that people who opt into being like celibate for reasons of being like a priest or religious reasons, do you think that these people aren't generally mentally healthy?
Well, I mean, I think they get better, I guess, through practice, but it takes usually a long time. And like the part before they're used to being celibate would be pretty.
Could you repeat that last sentence?
That the part before they were used to being celibate. I think they didn't have the best time.
Oh, okay, yeah, but this doesn't necessarily mean that they're not mentally healthy, though, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so
they're not. They are mentally healthy.
Okay, so yeah, so it is. Then you'd agree it is possible, at least, to without a sexual relationship, for plenty of people to be mentally healthy still. So with I guess what you really want to address here with the gatekeepers of relationships thing isn't just mental health on its own, but also the sort of like emotional well-being, which doesn't necessarily mean somebody's mentally unhealthy, but feeling bad is definitely not something we want in society. So I guess my question there would be, in terms of women's being gatekeepers of relationships, do you think that, you mentioned earlier you don't think this is a burden for women, but I'm wondering if you do think that that this dynamic is in some way at least unfair for women, because being the one who's approached and not the one who's doing the approaching, for a lot of people I'm sure feels objectifying, and it feels like you have less of less autonomy in the matter. I don't know if you get what I'm saying there, but just let me know if you understand.
I didn't hear anything you said. That
Okay, yeah, we were talking about gatekeepers of relationships still. I was going on about the for a lot of women, I'm sure being the gatekeeper of relationships isn't really a freeing experience. It's like you have to be the one who makes the right decisions in relationships, and you're not allowed to take certain people as partners. I'm sure for a lot of women that can be a burden. There is, not only are they the gatekeepers, but they have the social expectation to be the gatekeeper. Do you understand what I'm saying there? Why that would be a burden?
yes, but women could easily like just ask a man out, and like I don't think there'll be too much of a problem with that if I'm doing that. There may be like some expectations, but it's not like a huge one.
I'm sure for most men, the idea of being approached by a large group of women who they don't find attractive and who they'll be socially ostracized for starting relationships with is something that for most men wouldn't be a good thing. I think this is just something that you'd leave out if you just told men, hey, would you like to be approached by lots and lots of women all the time? That is something that they're going to be like, oh yeah, of course. But if you include the fact that like you'll be approached by a lot of women, but you won't find a lot of them attractive, and you'll be socially ostracized if you do find them attractive, and you have this huge burden. You'll be called like a slut and a bunch of rude names if you pick the wrong one. I think these are a lot of reasons why it is.
Well, wise things vote within the two sections, sex, like both are getting approached.
Both are getting what?
Both are getting approached. Wouldn't that just like equalize the
I do think this is a good thing that we should progress towards in society, but I don't necessarily mean the fact that this is good would be proof that men are more oppressed. The issue I disagree with you on here isn't like the idea that we should change society. I'm all for that. I'm a huge fan of changing the way that we do gender roles in the West, but I don't think that that men are more oppressed than women.
Oh. Alright, but like basically at this point at least you're saying that both women and men are oppressed in this system, but and while women do have like responsibility of like choosing, like I still think it comes down to that at least that they kind of have a choice. Like nothing's going to be purely good, I think, and I think that when it comes to relationship dynamics, men are going to have it worse.
So relationship dynamics are a very small part of overall society. I'm sure you'd agree with that. There are lots of things other than relationship dynamics in which men don't have it worse, in which men have it like better in many respects. For example, if you're upper middle class, it's much better to be a man than it is to be a woman. So do you think that might have anything to that might have some like play in the interactions between men and women? Don't you think that might be a good argument against the idea that men are more oppressed?
Hey, excuse me for asking, but how do women have it worse in middle class area? I would understand if you said like higher class, like 1%, but
I said upper middle class. I don't think that specifically in the middle class that women have it significantly worse. I don't really know much about that. I know in the upper middle class area, it's much better to be a man than it is to be a woman, just because of the fact that there is economic mobility there that you don't have if you're female.
well, yes, I do agree with that. My position mainly stands from that men have more of an economic and political advantage, and that women have a more biological, social advantage, which I do find personally, at least, more important.
Well, you say biological advantage, but I'm sure you'd agree that like biologically they don't have like the advantage in terms of like monopolies of violence, right?
Yes, but why would you want to be violent? It's, like, I know that people say that men are stronger, but that strength, there's not really many advantages that come with that, except today at least. Maybe back in the day it was more important, but not anymore. It's pretty much useless.
Well, in general society, it's useless, but in smaller areas of society, like in the home, there's like this amount of control you can have because of the fact that you're the one more capable of violence. I'm sure in day-to-day life you understand that like a man who looks as though he's more
can have a weapon.
This is true, but not everyone does. You'd agree, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so in many areas, then there are instances where being more capable of violence is going to give you an advantage. I'm sure one area that you'd agree, since you self-identify as an incel, right?
Well, yes, incel's not really something you identify as. It's more something that happens. It's involuntary celibate. It's you don't get sex even though you want sex. That's the pure definition of.
Yeah, sure. I was only asking so that I could use the term to describe you without you being like you thinking it's meant to be an insult or something.
Well, actually,
so
yeah.
In a lot of incel communities online, I'm sure you've noticed that like people like to point out the fact that men who are more capable of violence are considered more attractive on average. like men who are bigger and stronger
Yeah.
and have longer arms reach or whatever.
Yes.
So there are a huge amount of advantages associated with being the sex more capable of violence. So not only do you have like this ability to control smaller social situations because of the fact that you look more threatening and more imposing, but also if you're a man who's more
Wait, no. Why would you want to look more threatening and posing? That's literally opposite of what I want. Like,
well, for a lot of people, looking more threatening and more imposing means they have more social capital. Like, this is the reason why there are so many people who are bodybuilders.
yeah, I guess this is just purely my opinion.
And this isn't just a matter of just a matter of being more imposing. It's a matter of the effect of looking more imposing causes people to take you more seriously. So this is why you have a lot of bodybuilders, whereas you don't have so many power lifters.
Oh yes, I guess that makes sense.
So yeah, so if you're a man, people are going to, even if you're just as strong as another woman, people are going to take your strength more seriously. They're going to assume you're more strong. And because of that, a lot of aspects of social capital come along with being a man.
But with the strength, there is like one huge detractor, and is that if a war happens, that you are going to have to go die in that war, and that's one of the worst parts of being a man, and that's why like some people might be looking at like even having to leave the country to avoid like dying. Not like everybody, but like some people might be. Yeah. So like if you're a man, due to your strength, you'll just like be chosen to die in war.
Yeah, exactly. I don't disagree that there are some ways in which men are oppressed that women aren't. But I do think generally the statement that men are more oppressed than women is something that can't really be substantiated generally, because we find all of these every time we look at some specific way in which men are advantaged over women, or excuse me, in which men are not advantaged over women, in which women are advantaged over men. We see the inverse, and it's always directly related to the same reasons that men are advantaged.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so I would say generally it's not super sensible to say men are more advantaged than women. Overall, both sexes and both genders are they are oppressed in different ways that aren't really directly comparable. Would you say that makes sense?
I mean, yes, I guess. Yes, I did. Yes, I do think that makes sense.
All right, that sounds good. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Well, yes. Sorry. Sorry about that.
Oh, all right, there we go. Yeah, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yes, and like it's mostly is that you keep saying that women are equally oppressed, and I think maybe on average that's true, but I think I was speaking more of like men on like the lower end of the scale are going to have it just worse than like any other group. Like, and this includes women on the lower end of the scale as well. And like, as someone on the lower end of the scale myself, I think like at least on this level, men have it worse, and I think that's what I was mostly focusing on.
Yeah, I don't think I really have any contention with what you're saying there. I completely understand where you're coming from. I don't have anything specific that I can give that would like counter that. It's a pretty reasonable assessment that lower class men. Go ahead.
It was just something I just realized that that's what I was mostly focusing on when I said men. So
Yeah, I mean that seems completely reasonable. Is there anything else you wanted to chat about other than the male and female oppression thing?
yes, I think due to like even like some biological reasons, which I'm not gonna like go into that too much since I'm not very educated on it. But I think the last thing I want to say is the solution like to the problem. I think is it's not very most people are not gonna find this popular, and I don't see it happening soon. But I think like complete the ability to easily have complete uh like you're not gonna like this, I think, but the ability to have complete sex change for each gender is the only way I think that can stop this these problems in inequality, I think.
Well, I don't think it's the only way that we can stop these problems with inequality, but I do think it's a great first step, and I think it's a great thing that we should be striving towards as a society. I think that trans rights are very important. I think that another thing that's very important for getting rid of these toxic gender roles, I think, is the dismantling of capitalism. I think those are two big things, and overall, it seems like we mostly agree on that point. So this was a great conversation. If there's anything else you want to talk about, then we can go into that as well. But so far, this has been pretty good.
Yeah. So I think that's it. Like I know this is kind of like an unsatisfactory conversation, especially for those that seen my debate with Vosh, which many people found more entertaining. But that's it.
All right. Have a good one. Talk to you later.
Yeah. Bye.
All right. Peace.